Emma was a 9-year-old girl living in the small town of Willow Creek, California. Her life was very ordinary, like any other child, attending school, playing with friends, and going home every day after school. Emma's family loved and cared for her. But one day, everything changed. On a Friday afternoon, after school let out, Emma walked home as usual. However, that day, she never returned. Emma's mother, Laura, grew worried when it was time for dinner, and Emma still hadn't come home. "Where is Emma?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. As night fell and Emma still hadn't appeared, Laura began calling other parents, but no one knew where the girl had gone. She quickly called the police. They arrived at Emma's house and began investigating, but there were no signs indicating anything unusual. The police searched around the school and nearby roads, but there were no clues. Emma hadn't left any signs indicating anything was wrong. The entire town of Willow Creek was engulfed in confusion and fear. The next day, Laura went to the school to ask Emma's classmates. However, no one had seen her after school. There was only one witness, a boy from Emma's class, who said he saw her walking down an empty street. But after that, she disappeared. The police continued their investigation, but had no new leads. They interviewed neighbors, friends, and witnesses. But every trace led to a dead end. Emma seemed to have vanished mysteriously without leaving any trace. The town began to feel anxious and uneasy. Although the police couldn't find any clues, Laura didn't give up. She was determined to search for Emma herself every day. She drove down empty roads into nearby forests, hoping to find any sign of her daughter. But all she found was the eerie silence. A week passed, and there were still no signs of Emma. The searches by the police and Laura had all failed. However, at this point, a strange clue emerged. A local resident came to the police and said that he had seen an unfamiliar car parked near the area where Emma disappeared. But no one in town recognized the vehicle. The police continued to investigate the strange car. After checking the vehicle's registration, they discovered it belonged to a man named William Hayes, who lived on the outskirts of town. The police went to his house for questioning. When the police arrived at Hayes's house, they found it empty. There was no sign of him. However, one of the officers discovered Emma's jacket in his garage. After discovering the jacket, the police decided to investigate further into William Hayes. They found a record on him that revealed he had a history of mental illness and had exhibited strange behaviors in the past. This raised suspicions among the townspeople about Hayes's involvement in Emma's disappearance. Although there was no direct evidence, the police suspected that William Hayes was involved in Emma's disappearance. They continued searching for him throughout the town, but William Hayes had vanished without a trace, leaving the townspeople in fear. Despite the police continuing their search for William Hayes throughout the town, there was no trace of him. Witnesses claimed they had seen him the previous night in a nearby forest area, but all search efforts were in vain. William Hayes had vanished without a trace. Meanwhile, Laura, Emma's mother, no longer trusted the police efforts. She decided to take matters into her own hands, determined to find her daughter. "I can't just let this go," she said, her voice filled with resolve. Laura started searching places the police had overlooked. She went to the forest area where witnesses had seen William Hayes and began searching for any traces. On one search near the riverbank, she discovered a small bag containing some of Emma's belongings inside. The bag was a clear sign that Emma might have been nearby. Laura immediately informed the police, and they began focusing their search in this area. However, as they approached deeper into the forest, an eerie sensation overwhelmed them, as if someone was watching them. As the police and Laura continued searching, they discovered an old abandoned house deep in the forest, not far from where Emma's bag had been found. The house seemed to have been deserted for a long time, but there was something about it that made the group uneasy. As they approached the house, the front door suddenly opened on its own, as if someone was inside. Laura stopped, an unexplainable feeling rising in her chest. The police decided to enter and check, but as they stepped inside, a chilling silence engulfed them. Inside the house was a dim, dusty room filled with old furniture, but as they stepped into the living room, something strange appeared. On the floor, there was a hastily written note that read, "Emma is still here." The note made everything even more confusing. The police continued to inspect the house and unexpectedly discovered a secret room hidden behind a wall. The door was locked, but signs of forced entry were clear. The police opened the secret door, and they discovered a small, dark room inside. As they entered, they saw an old bed with signs that Emma had been there, and a picture of her was left on a table. Laura's heart stopped when she realized that her daughter might have been held captive in this house. Questions with no answers flooded her mind, and she knew she had to uncover the truth, no matter what. A strange noise echoed from behind, startling everyone. The door to the secret room slowly closed, and a figure appeared at the door. It was William Hayes. William stared at the group standing in the room, but he said nothing. Only his eyes spoke, filled with danger and coldness. The police demanded that he surrender, but William stood there, motionless. The police approached William Hayes, asking him to slowly raise his hands and step out of the door. However, William remained still, his eyes fixed on the group, as if contemplating something. The atmosphere in the room grew heavy, and the silence made everyone uneasy. "Why did you do it, William?" "Why did you take Emma?" the police chief asked, his voice firm. But William didn't respond, instead offering a mocking smile. "She's not here anymore," William said coldly. "She's gone." Laura couldn't take it any longer, and she lunged at William, grabbing his arm. "Tell me, William, tell me where my daughter is," she screamed, tears streaming down her face. William stared into her eyes, but his gaze was devoid of pity. The police chief stepped forward, pulling Laura away from William. But just then, William suddenly pushed open another hidden door, forcing the police to step back. Inside was a dark, eerie room, and immediately, something strange and haunting appeared. The door creaked open, and everyone stepped into a strange space, filled with bizarre paintings on the walls. The pictures depicted eerie scenes of children, all seemingly trapped. An ancient altar stood in the center of the room, adorned with objects that Laura recognized, items belonging to Emma. "This is where I keep the souls," William said, his voice low and filled with self-satisfaction. "Not just Emma, but many other children have been brought here by me." The police and Laura listened, unable to believe what they were hearing, a wave of horror rising within them. William explained that he believed in an ancient ritual, where the souls of children could grant him eternal life. "Emma was a part of this ritual," he said, "but she disappeared when I couldn't complete the ceremony." The police and Laura began to realize that what they had thought was a simple kidnapping was actually tied to a mystical ritual. "We have to stop him immediately," the police chief said. "Not just Emma, but all the other children are at risk." The confrontation between the police and William grew tense. As the officers tried to arrest William, he violently resisted, using strange tools he had prepared for the ritual. "You don't understand. I'm just fulfilling a higher purpose," William said, his voice frantic. Eventually, the police managed to subdue William and take him out of the house. However, they couldn't find Emma in the secret room. Laura, with her heart heavy, decided to continue searching. "She's still here somewhere," she said, unwilling to give up hope. After William Hayes was arrested, the police continued searching the abandoned house and surrounding areas. However, no further traces of Emma were found. The strange signs in the house remained unexplained. The investigation seemed to have reached a dead end. Laura didn't give up. She visited every place, from the empty forests to abandoned plots of land, tirelessly searching for any signs of her daughter. "Emma won't let me give up," she whispered. "I won't stop until I find her." A month later, one early morning, as Laura was searching through a nearby forest, she suddenly heard a noise. Turning around, she saw a small figure walking toward her. It was Emma. "Where have you been?" Laura choked out, rushing to hold Emma in her arms. Emma looked at her mother, her eyes filled with fear and confusion. "Mom, I don't remember anything. But I was in a very strange place." Emma returned home safely, but the mystery of her strange disappearance remained unsolved. However, the town of Willow Creek no longer felt the same fear, as the girl had come back. Nevertheless, the questions about William Hayes's strange ritual continued to haunt the town. Although the story didn't have a complete answer, Laura had found her daughter. Hope and a mother's love never faded, and their lives gradually returned to peace. As for William Hayes, he was imprisoned, but the mysteries surrounding him were far from being fully unraveled. Sophie was a 10-year-old girl living in a peaceful small town in Northern California. Every day after school, Sophie walked home with her close friends. The town she lived in was quiet. Everyone knew each other, and strange events rarely happened. Sophie loved her normal life and never imagined that one day, everything would change. But on one Tuesday afternoon, after school, Sophie didn't return home as usual. Her mother, Rachel, waited but didn't see her. At first, she thought Sophie might have stayed at school with friends. However, as evening came and Sophie's phone remained unreachable, Rachel began to worry. By dinner time, Rachel urgently called the police. They began searching for Sophie near the school and on familiar roads. However, there was no sign of where she could have gone. The once peaceful town suddenly became tense and worried. The police began investigating everything, from interviewing Sophie's classmates to checking nearby security cameras. However, one strange thing was that the cameras didn't capture anything unusual about Sophie that afternoon. There were no traces of her, as if she had vanished off the face of the earth. After 3 days of unsuccessful searching, rumors began to spread throughout the town. Some people said they had seen Sophie that afternoon, walking alone on a quiet road near the forest. These rumors only added to the increasing tension. One of the witnesses, a young girl, claimed she had seen Sophie near the forest outside town that afternoon. She seemed to be looking for someone. The girl said, "But I can't be sure because I only saw her from a distance." The police decided to expand their search area and investigate the surrounding forests. They explored a remote area near a lake, where Sophie might have passed through. However, when they arrived, they only found strange marks, as if someone had deliberately walked back and forth. Upon closer inspection, they found Sophie's bracelet lying near the lakeshore. Laura, Sophie's mother, immediately recognized it as the bracelet her daughter always wore. She was horrified and desperately urged the police to uncover the truth. The police began to suspect that Sophie might have been held captive somewhere in the surrounding area. They continued their search in abandoned plots and suburban areas, where similar disappearances had occurred years ago. After a week of searching, the police discovered an abandoned house hidden behind some ancient trees, a place no one in town remembered anyone living. Inside the house, they found traces of Sophie, the girl's backpack, and strange marks on the floor. Upon further inspection, the police discovered a hidden room in the house, with a strange altar. On the altar was a picture of Sophie and some of her personal belongings. Gradually, the police realized that the disappearances in the town weren't coincidences. They were all connected to an ancient ritual, and this house was the place where souls were kept. But would Sophie be able to escape? Or would she become part of that ritual? The police decided to cordon off the area around the abandoned house, but they knew time was running out. Unable to stay idle, Laura decided to enter the house herself, hoping to find her daughter, or at least a clue about what had happened. As she entered the secret room, Laura felt a strange energy. The objects around her didn't seem like things left behind by accident, but as if they had a purpose. She glanced around and stopped at the altar, where Sophie's picture was placed. A chilling, eerie feeling enveloped her. Laura continued searching the dark room. Suddenly, she discovered a small door, covered by a wooden panel, although it seemed like no one had opened it in years. She felt compelled to explore. Reaching out to open the door, she felt an unusual chill emanating from within. As the door creaked open, an entirely different space appeared before her eyes. A long, narrow hallway led down to old wooden stairs, seemingly descending into a basement below. She must be down there, Laura thought, and decided to continue exploring. Laura carefully descended the stairs, the cold sensation growing more intense. At the bottom, she saw a small room with a bed and a table filled with strange items. On the bed was a blanket covering a figure, but it wasn't Sophie. Suddenly, a figure stepped out from the shadows. It was William Hayes. He smiled faintly, a cold smile devoid of humanity. "You found it," William said, his voice echoing in the stillness. "But the girl is no longer here." Tell me where my daughter is, Laura screamed, her fists clenched. But William just stared at her coldly. She has become part of the ritual, William said, his voice echoing like a curse. Sophie will never return. William stepped closer to Laura, but before he could do anything, the police arrived. They attacked William, subduing him and arresting him. However, when they checked the room, there was no sign of Sophie, only a cloth-covered table, but under it was a strange box. The police opened the strange box and found an ancient book inside. The pages of the book contained accounts of ancient rituals and souls trapped within objects. But while the book revealed part of the ritual, it didn't provide any information about Sophie's whereabouts. Laura looked at the book, feeling that this was the key to solving all the mysteries. Sophie must be connected to the souls in here, she said, her voice resolute. But the questions about the ritual and the trapped souls remained unanswered. Although the police had arrested William and the ancient rituals seemed to have been broken, Laura didn't give up hope. She believed that Sophie was still alive and that she would find her daughter, no matter what horrors lay ahead. Laura didn't give up. Even though the police had arrested William Hayes, she continued to investigate. She believed that her daughter was still alive, and that the rituals William had performed weren't entirely over. Laura decided to search for other clues the police had missed. She returned to the forest where Sophie had disappeared last. This was the place where all the clues pointed. But it was also the place that gave Laura an overwhelming sense of foreboding. Laura stopped, feeling something strange in the air. Once again, she noticed small footprints imprinted in the dirt, Sophie's footprints. Laura followed the footprints, venturing deeper into the forest. Her feeling grew stronger that Sophie was near, that these traces were leading to a secret place. Suddenly, Laura heard a strange sound, like whispers from afar, an indistinct voice, yet deeply haunting. Laura walked toward the source of the sound, her heart pounding. She felt an unseen presence following her, but couldn't see anyone. Eventually, she stood in front of an ancient wooden door hidden among the bushes. This door was identical to the one she had seen in William's book. Laura opened the door, and an unfamiliar space appeared before her. It was a mysterious room, with walls covered in ancient symbols. In the dim space, a large altar stood in the center, surrounded by strange objects. She felt a rising fear. On the altar was an ancient book and a bracelet identical to Sophie's. Laura froze, a chill running down her spine. She must be here, she whispered. But just as she approached, a voice echoed from the darkness. Sophie can't escape from here, the voice said, and from the shadows, a figure stepped forward. It was William. She has become part of this ritual. She will remain here forever. Laura felt like the world was crashing down. I won't let that happen, she screamed, gripping Sophie's bracelet tightly. Her eyes shone with fierce determination. No matter the danger, she would save her daughter. Laura charged toward William, still clutching Sophie's bracelet. William stood motionless, his eyes cold and emotionless. I won't let this girl become the second soul, Laura yelled, William didn't resist, but just then, a strong wind swept through. The entire space around them began to tremble. Suddenly, a loud explosion rang out, causing everything around to shatter. When the smoke cleared, Laura found herself standing alone, unable to see William or any trace of him. But when she looked down at her hand, Sophie's bracelet had disappeared, as if it had dissolved into the air. Laura stood there, unsure of what had just happened, but she felt as though a new chapter in her life had begun. She still didn't give up hope, and with her unwavering love for her daughter, she would continue searching. Despite there being no signs of Sophie, Laura couldn't give up hope. She knew that her daughter's disappearance wasn't the end, but the beginning of another journey, one full of hardship, but also hope. She decided to search for new clues, not just in town, but in distant places as well. A month later, Laura received an unexpected call from a stranger. "I can help you find Sophie," the voice said over the phone. A surge of anticipation filled her heart. Could this be a new hope? She decided to meet this person, despite feeling a bit fearful. The stranger was a woman named Sarah, an expert in researching paranormal phenomena. Sarah said she had heard about Sophie's disappearance through the news and had information that could help Laura. She had previously researched mysterious disappearances in the forests around town. Sarah led Laura to a deep forest where, according to Sarah, there were strange signs of trapped souls. "I believe Sophie might still be there, between our world and another," Sarah said, her eyes filled with determination. As they reached a desolate area in the forest, they found a bracelet identical to Sophie's. Lying under a large tree root, Laura felt a chilling presence surrounding them, as if someone was near. She looked at the bracelet and whispered, "Where are you, my dear?" Just as Laura picked up the bracelet, a strong gust of wind blew through, and a voice echoed in the air. "Mom, you're here. You'll find me," the voice whispered, leaving Laura stunned. She felt an invisible yet hopeful force, as if Sophie was near. Sarah looked at Laura, noticing the change in her eyes. "Sophie is still alive. I can feel it," Sarah said. "We must keep searching, and one day, we will find her." Laura nodded, her heart full of belief that this journey wasn't over yet.